If you have been dealing with on and off knee pain in the gym for quite some time, every time you get to the bottom of your squat, your knee just blows up, or anytime you start to push your running intensity, you get that horrible throbbing pain at the front of your knee after your session, then this video is going to be the starting point for getting you back to training legs with high intensity for strength, hypertrophy, and performance. Just like I did for my client Cal. 1 year of knee pain rotating through barbell squats, leg presses, lunges, split squats with a different coach, and no matter what interventions he did, he still saw that knee pain come back through every training phase. Within one one-to-one personal training session, we were not only able to eliminate that knee pain, but get him connecting to his glutes a lot more efficiently. And that is exactly what we're going to build towards today with you. My name is Josh. I've been in the personal training industry for over a decade now, and now a qualified physiotherapist. And I have coached and rehabbed everyone from gym pop, competitive bodybuilders, and powerlifters. Not only that, but I help coaches develop their own training and coaching skills and help them push further towards their own physique goals. In this video, we're going to discuss why most conventional physiotherapy practices fail when it comes to MSK rehab, especially at the knee. And we're going to address two complexes that are going to improve both foot, knee, and hip mechanics so that you can start progressing within the gym and start loading up those lower body exercises with the same kind of intensity that you used to do before you were injured. Now, when you go to see a physiotherapy and explain that you've been having knee pain, you will likely get a generic diagnosis such as patellofemoral pain or some other fancy term. Then you'll be given one of these and be given an exercise plan, which is mostly going to consist of hip bridges, clamshells, and potentially leg extensions. Now, if you spend all day at a desk, you don't really train very much, you're not very active, then yeah, something like this might not be the worst thing for you to use when it comes to basic training goals. But if you're someone who's trained for a decent amount of time in sport, in the gym, you squat heavy, you train hard, and you've been doing so for a decent amount of time, then a 2 kilo mini band isn't going to provide the relevant stimulus that you need to progress and create the adaptation that we want around the structures of the knee. And I can say this from personal experience. When I was in my early 20s, I dislocated my knee playing sport, didn't rehab it, and then 3 years later, while I was powerlifting, I had a full dislocation while I was prepping for a powerlifting competition. There was no consistent rehab plan following the dislocation. There was no return to powerlifting plan that I was given by my physio, and the biomechanical adaptations that were created because of that left knee dislocation fed further up the chain into my hips and my lower back. Okay, so the first area that we need to address if we are looking at general knee pain is the foot. Now, from an anatomical perspective, the foot has a lot of bones and joints that articulate with each other to create different shapes and positions that require mobility and rigidity at the same time. And this is all relative to the task we are trying to do, whether we are running or trying to absorb force or produce force through our lower body exercises. If we have relatively weak or stiff feet that cannot change shape, that cannot reduce or absorb that force, then we are going to see a negative feedback loop further up the chain towards the knee and the hip, especially in exercises that require us to produce or absorb a lot of that force, like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, running, or even sprinting within sports. Now, for parts of the body that have a lot of joints that are meant to communicate and articulate with each other, I'm a really big fan of using complexes or supersets within the gym to create a wide range of stimulus to suit those articulations. One of the lower level drills I like to give is some sort of tibialis controlled articular rotation with a kettlebell or a tib bar. And what we want to think about doing with this exercise is creating a large circular motion both clockwise and counterclockwise to open up that ankle joint, get some synovial fluid within that joint. You can set this up in any gym on a bench, use something to keep your knee soft or unlocked, and do this for 10 to 20 reps. Straight from there, we can superset that with a pronation focused lunge so we can teach that foot to absorb and change shape as we push through the floor. What we want to think about doing here is standing with our hips relatively open, our heel planted, our big toe planted, and our little toe planted, and we want to think about driving our knee forward nice and slowly, letting the foot flatten out. And what I'm really thinking about here is moving the heel away from the big toe, so almost like I'm stretching out the base of my foot so it flattens and we get that pronation. Now, if we do struggle with this, we can experiment with using smaller wedges or lifting straps as an external tool to give you awareness of what to push into. Okay, so now that we've addressed the foot in this complex, we want to look at the hip, and more importantly, how the femur can articulate within the hip socket while the foot is planted as we move through flexion and extension. As the knee is the middle joint between both the foot and the hip, and while it does have mostly a flexion component, there is a lot of rotational capabilities within the knee as well. So in the same way that the foot needs to change shape and absorb and produce force, the hip will also need to rotate into the same relative joint positions. One of my go-to here is something like a front foot elevated split squat with a vertical translation of the the pelvis. We're simply going to choose this over something like a Bulgarian split squat simply because it helps us shift our center of mass backward, where it's a little bit easier to manage that foot pressure and loading a little bit more into the heel. What is also important about this is if we create a very strong contact with the foot and appropriately load this, we can get very, very strong at this exercise and see a nice crossover to our other lower body lifts. And for loading this, I'm a really big fan of using a dumbbell just for a bit of contralateral rotation, or if you want to get a little bit heavy and a bit more interesting with your exercise selection, a Zercher position is a really good way to load this up and create that front reach to get the scapula wrapping around the rib cage and open up the back of the rib cage as well. And a really easy exercise to pair this with is going to be something like a lying hamstring curl, just to get the hamstrings warmed up before a heavy squat. So one thing you'll notice within this video is I haven't really discussed any mobility or stretching techniques. This is simply because if your training quality is high, if your dosage, your volume, your execution, and your intensity is in a very good spot, we rarely need to do any mobility routines because there is no poor adaptation that we are trying to undo from our poor training. The majority of leg sessions that we see, especially within the physique space, are centered around machines. So most leg sessions will be leg press, adductor, leg extension, and ham curl, which, as you'll know by this video, neglects the foot and hip patterning, which is so important to improving knee flexion mechanics. And if you want to see this type of coaching applied to real life case studies with athletes, bodybuilders, powerlifters, feel free to follow me on Instagram @CoachCar, and also don't forget to like and subscribe for a lot more content.